Hello everyone and welcome to Danny's Book Corner. If you've been keeping up with my channel, you have probably noticed I haven't been posting all that much except for one video that was just for a class really. That was really fun to do. I haven't been posting that much because I actually got sick over the break, but at least in the meantime I was able to read a bunch of books. So what I want to do for you guys is to put out a bunch of reviews of a bunch of books that I have been reading recently. So I'm going to tell you guys about probably the worst book I have read thus far in 2019. Now that book is Evidence of Things Not Seen by Lindsay Lane. This, I'm pretty sure, is her debut work. So of course I wouldn't expect it to be the most amazing in the world. Unlike Divergent or The Hunger Games. Actually no, never mind, not The Hunger Games, that was not a debut work. So before I get into this review, I'm going to make the very typical booktuber review discussion disclaimer. Because if you like this book, that's totally okay with me. If you don't like this book like I do, that's totally fine. Like, I don't care. Like, we can have a discussion in the comments later. I don't care what you think about this book. Let's just have a discussion about it. While this book wasn't the absolute worst thing I've ever read in my life, that doesn't mean I really enjoyed it. I mean, you could tell this book is very, very short. It's like maybe 200 pages, something like that, and it took me so long to get through this. I mean, it might have been partly because I had kind of a head cold when I was reading this, so I might have been like not all there, like in the head department there. But I just felt like this was so difficult to read, and I had actually read a fantasy novel before I read this book, and that was not as difficult to get through as this one was. So that's why I'm like a little bit conflicted as to why this was so difficult to read. But I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So what in the world is this book even about? So this book is about a guy named Tommy who's in high school and he suddenly goes missing, totally out of the blue. The only thing that's left is his motorbike, which he named Ruby because it's red. So this book is told from about 23 different perspectives of people in the town or around the town that kind of know Tommy or know of him to try to figure out what in the world happened to him, where he went. So in the beginning of the book we get some very basic facts about Tommy. He really loves physics and he's especially interested in quantum mechanics, which is a very high level of physics that is very confusing and has a lot of theory, and it's a lot. He also believes in the existence of parallel universes, that is, there would be multiple universes that exist at the exact same moment. So every time you make a decision, that one decision could change the outcome in all those different universes. And the peculiar thing about Tommy is that he wasn't so great at social interaction, but not in the way that he just had social anxiety, but in the way that he was very awkward. As you read through the book, you kind of infer he might be on the autism spectrum or something like that, but it's never directly stated that he is, so I'm not 100% sure on that one. But basically the book follows all these people trying to figure out what in the world happened to Tommy. So before I get into the negative part of this review, let me tell you a couple of things that I did actually like about this book. Mostly, I kind of like the format of it. With a couple of the different perspectives, it's obviously a discussion between a detective and the other person, but it only shows the other person's responses, and it doesn't show the detective's questions or his responses at all. And there's no quotation marks or anything like that. And I thought that was just an interesting way to present the story, and I liked seeing that. Another format that I liked was seeing these little clippings from Tommy's notebook, because he also kept a notebook with all his different musings and ideas about quantum mechanics and parallel universes and stuff like that. So I thought that was a very good way to understand Tommy's psyche and understand his character a little bit better than just hearing about it from other characters. Now this is getting a little into the negative bit, but I didn't feel like the other characters were able to paint Tommy in a very good light, and I didn't understand him all that well. It's almost like they just told me these basic facts over and over again, and I didn't totally understand him. But these little notebook clippings really helped with that. So unfortunately, that's about all that I really liked about this book. Where do I begin with what I didn't like about this book? So I did say earlier that this was very difficult to get through. I feel like the pacing is a bit off, and I'm not exactly sure why. Probably because of all the different perspectives that you keep having to switch between, because when you get to a new chapter, it's a new perspective. So you kind of have to switch gears immediately after you finish one chapter. Many of these perspectives deal with very difficult, very heavy, and honestly very disturbing topics such as rape. And of course it's okay to talk about these topics in a book, but I felt like they weren't fleshed out enough. And I felt like there wasn't enough time spent on each character to really feel empathy for them and to relate to them in any sort of way. It's almost like as soon as we were done with their story, we just switched to another character and it's like, oh, alright, we're done with that character now. It's like I wasn't able to sit with their story for long enough to empathize with them or anything like that. It was kind of strange. I mean, of course I could put the book down, but when I'm reading a book, I don't want to like put it down after every single chapter. So on that note of characters, some of them felt like they didn't really fit in with the story. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier when I was describing to you about the book, but some of them don't really know Tommy all that well, or some of them don't even know who he is at all. So it's kind of confusing as to why they are included, because some of these characters don't seem to really further the plot in trying to figure out where in the world Tommy is. For example, there is one girl who picks up a scrap of paper from Tommy's notebook and notices he writes about Ruby. Now, she doesn't know that Ruby is his motorcycle, so she wonders, oh, who's this girl and this guy that are talking about each other? I wonder how they're doing. That's about the extent that it relates to Tommy, and I was just confused as to where that fits in with everything. There's another story that's very early in the book about an immigrant Mexican girl, and she is left by one of her closest friends who's almost a mother figure to her, because she's not allowed to go on the caravan because her son is sick, so she leaves it with the girl. And then the girl is then left on her own with a baby who is sick. So then this girl is taken in by a woman who knows Tommy, who owns a farm, and she would let Tommy just kind of wander around the farm however he wished, because he would just tend to do that. And that's about the extent of to her connection with Tommy. So again, I was confused as to why she was mentioned. She was mentioned only one other time, again in the book. So again, it's not like these characters were mentioned once and then they were brought back later. Some of them were briefly mentioned only once again later in the novel, and it didn't seem to have any weight to it. Like, it's just like, oh, that immigrant Mexican girl that she took in. Like, it was just an offhand reference. Like, it had little significance. For the most part, that's what really bothered me with this book. I could see the author maybe trying to convey the idea that we impact each other's lives in ways that we have absolutely no idea, even if they are the almost smallest insignificant ways. But that just didn't come across in this novel. If that was her intention, I'm not 100% sure. But it just could have been executed better, I think, if that was her intention. So the book just didn't seem cohesive for me for the reasons I just mentioned. There's also a lot of references to parallel universes and concepts in quantum mechanics, which can very easily go over a lot of people's heads, because I personally don't understand everything in quantum mechanics, even though I did have an interest in it for a little bit. Like, I used to watch PBS documentaries on it, and it was interesting, but it's not an easy concept to grasp. Even the idea of parallel universes is really weird. So, like, I understand this idea of trying to get this interconnectedness between characters and between all these different parallel universes, but I feel like including the quantum mechanics kind of goes over a lot of readers' heads, because it certainly went over mine, and I honestly had to put this book down a bunch of times because I was like, alright, this is too much, gotta put this down, my head kind of hurts reading this right now. So, and the ending of this book also really annoyed me because it felt like it just had no conclusion. Of course, it's okay for a book not to really have a strong conclusion and for you to feel satisfied with the ending. Like, cliffhanger endings are fine. Or like feeling like you have no real satisfaction with it. Like, there's still other things that have to be resolved. But this just felt like we went in a huge circle and we got nowhere. At the very beginning, you have no idea where Tommy is. At the end, you still have no idea where Tommy is. The only theory that I can come up with is that he disappeared into a parallel universe because he was so fascinated with that. That's the only thing that kind of makes sense. And even then, that's not a very satisfying conclusion because it just doesn't fit all together. I guess maybe the author was trying to convey the idea that, oh, we don't ever have simple answers in life. You can't just expect us to know, oh, he ended up like in another state, or he's dead, or hey, he's back here now. I guess I could understand that idea, but it just didn't come across that way, and like I said, we just end up going in a huge circle. And another thing on the note of characters, as soon as I finished reading one of the short stories about one of the characters, I almost immediately forgot their name. So I think that's a telling point, is if you cannot remember the character's name, they've made very little impact on you. So the only person I can remember their name is Tommy, because he was talked about in pretty much every single story. So as you can tell, this is not my favorite book that I've read thus far this year. I mean, I actually gave it 1 star on Goodreads, which I never do. I rarely even really give like 2 or 3 stars, so this was unusual to give it 1 star to this one. So obviously I would not really recommend this book to you guys. I mean, if you want to check it out, feel free, but I personally would not recommend it. I was honestly just left confused in this book and unsatisfied. Alright guys, so that is my review of Evidence of Things Not Seen by Lindsay Lane. Let me know if you guys have read this book and what you think of it, because I'm curious to know, because it seems like not many people have read this book. The only reviews I've really seen are the ones I looked at on Goodreads. So let me know what you think. Like this video if you enjoyed watching it and you want to see more reviews from me. Don't forget to subscribe to see more content from me and hit the bell icon to see notifications from me. And I will see you guys all later. Bye!